Let me ask you something before we start. When's the last time anyone actually sat down with your VA file and added it up? Not glanced at it, actually recalculated it. Because if you served before 1990, there's a real chance the number on your award letter hasn't matched reality in years. That's not on you. The rules moved. Your file stayed exactly where it was. Make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now, because every week I cover the real financial information that affects seniors directly, the rules that changed, the protections you already qualify for, and the steps that actually make a difference. This is exactly the kind of content I put out every single week, and you do not want to miss it. Now let's get into it. Why 1990 is the line that actually matters. Veterans who served before 1990 fall into a window that covers the Vietnam War, the years right after it, and the Cold War drawdown leading into the Gulf War, which officially started August 2nd, 1990. What sets your group apart isn't just your age, it's exposure, specifically to herbicides like Agent Orange, used heavily by the military from 1962 through 1975, and to a handful of other exposures we'll get to. That word exposure only carries weight because of a second word, presumptive. When something is presumptive, the VA is legally required to assume it's connected to your service. You don't have to prove a single thing. No affidavits, no chasing down a corpsman from 1971. If your dates and location match a recognized presumptive category and you have the diagnosis, the connection is automatic under the law. That's the entire mechanism, and it rarely gets explained this plainly. The legal foundation for most of this is the PACT Act, signed into law August 10th, 2022. Formally, the Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act. It's the single biggest expansion of presumptive benefits in VA history, and is still being implemented in phases years later. That matters because it means the list of what qualifies keeps growing. It's not a one-time event you can miss and be done with. The exposure everyone's heard of and still gets wrong. Start with Agent Orange, since it's the most famous and still the most misunderstood. If you served in Vietnam between January 9th, 1962 and May 7th, 1975, exposure is presumed. Under 38 CFR Section 3.309E, there are roughly 20 recognized presumptive conditions tied to that exposure. Type 2 diabetes, ischemic heart disease, several cancers including prostate and bladder, and peripheral neuropathy, to name the major ones. Here's the update most veterans haven't caught up on yet. Hypertension, ordinary high blood pressure, became a presumptive condition effective January 8th, 2025, along with a blood disorder called MGUS, monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance. That's genuinely recent. Many veterans and even some VSOs are still catching up on it. This matters enormously for your generation specifically, because a huge share of aging veterans already have a hypertension diagnosis sitting in their medical chart, completely disconnected from their VA file. If that's you, this is worth a claim by itself. And the map of qualifying locations is wider than most people assume. Korean DMZ, roughly September 1st, 1967 to August 31st, 1971. U.S. or Royal Thai bases in Thailand, January 9th, 1962 to June 30th, 1976. Blue Water Navy service within 12 nautical miles of the Vietnamese coast, added by the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act of 2019. Laos, Cambodia, Guam, American Samoa, reservists with documented contact with contaminated C-123 aircraft after the war. Same rule applies across that whole list. Match the dates and location, have the diagnosis, and the connection is automatic. A veteran service officer can check your exact base and service dates against that list at no charge. And before anyone says, I can't prove I was exposed, you were never required to. Your DD-214 and your orders are the proof. The only remaining question is whether you have the diagnosis, and your medical records already settled that. One more thing worth knowing, an old denial isn't necessarily the final word. If you were told no before a condition like hypertension or a specific cancer was added to the presumptive list, you can file again under the rules as they stand now. This is called a supplemental claim, and it uses VA Form 200995. In some Agent Orange cases, a long-running class action called NEMR can even push your effective date back to your original filing. Worth asking a VSO about directly. For the January 2025 hypertension and MGUS editions specifically, filing a supplemental claim within 1 year of the rule change can help protect an earlier effective date. So don't sit on this one. The exposure most veterans have never once connected to themselves. This is the one that gets skipped constantly because most people only associate toxic exposure with Vietnam. If you spent any time at Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune or MCAS New River in North Carolina between August 1st, 1953 and December 31st, 1987, for a cumulative 30 days or more, the drinking water on base was contaminated for decades with industrial solvents, including trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene. This affected Marines, sailors, their families, and civilian base workers alike, an estimated 1 million people over that period. The VA currently recognizes 8 conditions as presumptively connected to that water for disability compensation purposes: kidney cancer, liver cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, adult leukemia, multiple myeloma, Parkinson's disease, bladder cancer, and aplastic anemia or other myelodysplastic syndromes. If you serve the qualifying time at either base and carry one of those diagnoses, you don't need to prove causation. The law already assumes it. There's also a broader list of 15 conditions that qualify for cost-free VA health care, even without a compensation claim. Here's an important detail people get confused. There was a separate legal deadline, August 10th, 2024, for filing a lawsuit under the Camp Lejeune Justice Act in federal court, and that deadline has already passed. But that's the lawsuit route, not the VA disability claim. The VA disability presumptive claim has no filing deadline. You can file it this year, next year, or a decade from now, whenever you're ready. Don't let anyone tell you a window has closed on the benefit itself. It hasn't. File it with VA Form 215-26EZ, the standard disability compensation application. The one that gets waived off as not a big deal if you spent time around artillery, aviation, armor, or anything loud without real hearing protection. And protection standards decades ago were nowhere close to today's. There's a strong chance you have a rateable hearing condition that's never been formally evaluated for compensation. Mentioning the ringing to your family doctor for 20 years doesn't count for VA purposes. You need a dedicated VA audiological exam specifically for a disability rating, which the VA schedules once you file a claim for hearing loss or tinnitus. Now the piece almost nobody understands, and it's the one that actually moves your check. This is what I asked you to stick around for. When you have more than one service-connected condition, the VA does not add the percentages together. It runs everything through a combined ratings table, built on the idea that nobody can be rated more than 100% disabled. So each new condition only applies against whatever percentage of you is still considered undamaged, not against a full 100. The VA rounds the final combined number to the nearest 10%. Here's a concrete version. Say your file has exactly one thing on it, 10% for tinnitus, rated back in the late 1980s, untouched since. Now you finally go back and claim everything you should have years ago. A 30% back condition, 20% for hypertension, or diabetes under Agent Orange, and another 10% for hearing loss. Simple addition says that 70% run it through the VA's actual formula and it lands at a combined 60%. That's still a massive shift. At 2026 rates, 2025 with a 2.8% cost of living adjustment, 10% alone pays $180.42 a month for a veteran with no dependents. A combined 60% pays $1,435.02 a month. That's over $1,250 more every month, north of $15,000 a year, that was legally available and simply never claimed because nobody ever went back and added the second, third, and fourth condition to the file. It keeps compounding as the combined rating climbs, and it climbs further if you have a spouse or dependent children. At 2026 rates, 70%, veteran with a spouse, $2,073.98 a month. 90%, veteran with a spouse, $2,703.70 a month. 100%, veteran with a spouse, $4,318.98 a month. A single veteran with no dependents at 100% gets $3,938.57, plus VA healthcare priority and in many states, property tax relief. These figures change again every December with the COLA adjustment, so confirm the current number on va.gov before you act on it. Two more things that can push your combined rating higher than the basic math suggests. The bilateral factor. If you have ratings on both arms or both legs, the VA adds an extra boost before combining them into your overall total. TDIU, total disability based on individual unemployability. If your service-connected conditions prevent you from holding steady, gainful work, you may qualify to be paid at the full 100% rate, even if your combined scheduler rating is lower, say 70%. The takeaway isn't one giant hidden benefit. Most veterans from this era are missing 3 or 4 smaller ones, and the recalculation is where the real number actually comes from. The benefit almost nobody asks for by name. This applies to a smaller group, veterans with more severe conditions, loss of use of a limb, or a genuine need for regular help with daily activities because of service-connected disabilities. Special monthly compensation, SMC, stacks on top of your regular rating, but it is never handed out automatically. It has to be specifically requested. A lot of veterans who've quietly declined over 20 or 30 years have never had their file reviewed for it. What this means for the people you leave behind, this part matters more than most veterans realize. If your service-connected conditions ever contribute to your death, your spouse may become eligible for dependency and indemnity compensation, or DIC, a tax-free monthly benefit, currently $1,699.36 a month in 2026, effective December 1st, 2025, with additional amounts on top for dependent children, aid and attendance, or a housebound spouse. There's also what's called the 8-year provision. If you were rated 100% permanently and totally disabled for at least 8 continuous years before death, and your spouse was married to you throughout that period, DIC applies even if your cause of death wasn't directly tied to that condition. And it adds an extra $360.85 a month on top of the base rate in 2026. Getting your rating properly recalculated now isn't just about your check. It can directly determine what your spouse is entitled to later. The application is VA Form 2, 1P534EZ. One more thing worth tracking if you're a retiree. If you were medically retired for a combat-related condition before completing 20 years of service, part of your retirement pay may currently be offset against your VA disability compensation. There's a bill in Congress right now, the Major Richard Starr Act, H.R. 2102 in the House, S. 1032 in the Senate, aimed at ending that offset for an estimated 50,000 plus affected retirees. As of mid-2026, it has not passed. It has strong bipartisan co-sponsor support, over 330 House co-sponsors, but it's been blocked twice by objection when brought up for unanimous consent. In the Senate, and an attempt to attach it to this year's defense authorization bill did not make the final version. Veteran organizations are now pushing a broader legislative package as an alternative path forward. I'm not promising it's coming, but if this applies to you, it's worth watching and worth flagging to a VSO now, so you're ready if it moves. What to actually do this week. Start at va.gov and pull your complete disability rating history. Look at every listed condition and when it was added. If nothing's changed in the last 5 years, that's your first sign the file is out of date. If you served in Vietnam, the Korean DMZ, Thailand, or anywhere on that expanded herbicide list, and you've never been evaluated for the newer presumptive conditions, hypertension especially, effective January 8th. 2025 filed specifically for that review using VA Form 21526EZ or a supplemental claim on Form 200995 if you were denied before. If you spent 30 days or more at Camp Lejeune or MCAS New River between 1953 and 1987 and have one of the 8 recognized conditions, file that claim too. There's no deadline on it. If you've got any hearing issue that's never been formally rated, request a VA audiological exam. If you have more than one service-connected condition rated separately over the years, ask for a combined ratings recalculation. Don't assume today's percentage reflects what you actually earned. File an intent to file, VA Form 210966. As soon as you decide to pursue any of this, it locks in your potential effective date while you gather records so you don't lose money to the paperwork process. Bring in a veteran service organization, the DAAV, the VFW, or the American Legion, to go through your file with you. That help is always free. Anyone asking for money up front is the wrong person to be talking to. The presumptive list keeps growing. Hypertension, effective January 2025, is the biggest addition most of this generation hasn't caught up on. And Camp Lejeune is the exposure most veterans never think to check for themselves. The combined ratings table means small, separate conditions stack into real money, and most files from this era have never been recalculated properly. Hearing loss and special monthly compensation are sitting unclaimed for plenty of you, and getting your rating right now can shape what your spouse is entitled to later. None of it moves on its own. The VA doesn't call you when the law changes, and your file doesn't update itself.